Welcome to the Women in the Arena podcast, a platform dedicated to honoring America's women veterans who dare greatly in all aspects of life. I'm your host, Sarah Scully. At Women in the Arena, we harness the power of storytelling to illuminate the human experience. Through authentic narratives, we honor the resilience, authenticity, and leadership of women who have served our country. Our name, Women in the Arena, pays homage to Theodore Roosevelt's legendary speech, The Man in the Arena, recognizing the remarkable contributions of women in traditionally male-dominated domains. Welcome back to the Women in the Arena podcast. In today's episode, I have the honor of sitting down with the amazing Alea Nadeem, a remarkable leader in national security, congressional affairs, and veteran advocacy. Alea's journey to service is unlike any other, shaped by incredible resilience. Alea is an Air Force officer with a diverse background, serving in the security forces, shaping defense policy, and leading efforts to advance women in service through the Air Force's Women's Initiative team. She currently serves as the Director of DoorKeepers for the United States Senate Sergeant-at-Arms, ensuring the seamless operation of Senate proceedings and security functions. Alea's story is one of overcoming adversity, forging a path of service, and empowering others to lead with courage. This episode contains discussions on sensitive topics, including surviving childhood trauma and overcoming complex family dynamics. We are deeply grateful to Alea for her trust in sharing her story today, and we encourage our listeners to prioritize their well-being. Please take a moment to assess whether engaging with these topics will be supportive and healing for you. Alea, welcome to the Women in the Arena podcast. We are so stoked that you're here. Alea is a recommendation for the show from another guest that we had on the Iron Butterfly podcast. And so we love getting recommendations and connections from our fellow podcast guests from the past, making new connections. And we're so excited to tell your story, talk about some of the work you've done, what you're currently doing. There's so much that we can get into. So first, can you introduce yourself to our listeners?
Yeah, so Alea Nadeem, currently working in the Senate. It's called the Director of DoorKeepers. Sounds like a Harry Potter job. And then for my military side, I'm in the Guard, New Mexico Air National Guard, and then actually lead a security forces squadron.
Awesome. Yeah, I always love explaining what your job is because, like you said, it does sound Harry Potter-esque. So can you explain what your job entails? Because I think that people who aren't familiar with that title, it does sound a little bit mysterious.
No. Well, I think the best way to describe what my duty title is to go back to the history.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go back to Continental Congress. I know, like all my history buffs here. This is your day.
Yes.
So Continental Congress is meeting between Philadelphia and then New York at some point. And one thing they're having a hard time with is once they get everybody, in the same area, they need a quorum. And what's interesting is people had to travel back then. It wasn't like they could get on a plane or a car. So it took a lot of time for them to travel in. And what was happening is when they wanted to call a quorum, they couldn't get all the senators or the congressional folks in the same room. And so they couldn't get a quorum. And so the head at that time said, we need to hire a position, and the position is going to be a doorkeeper, and their one job is to literally lock the door to keep the senators in and the congressmen in, and also to keep everybody else out. So the first hired position was the doorkeeper. And with that, actually, the doorkeeper would literally lock the door and then wouldn't open it until it needed to be opened. And they hired somebody who was illiterate because they didn't want that person to be able to write or talk about what they were hearing.
Oh, wow. How interesting.
So I want you to know the bar has moved.
That doesn't apply to you.
I'm not illiterate and I'm a woman. And so we've come so far. And so they hire the doorkeeper. And so the Senate is a very traditional place. And so to this day, they call it the doorkeeper. So I'm the director of the doorkeepers. And we really do still manage the doors, make sure who's authorized in, who's not authorized. And so that is what I do, is essentially try to maintain access to the Senate floor and maintain the decorum and rules.
Yeah, I really wish we could get into some of your crazy stories. I know you can't
No.
probably tell them, but gosh, I know you've seen some crazy things in there. So
Who hasn't?
fun history fact though. I learned something today for sure. All right, let's talk about your background, because your story is one of hope, resilience, strength, forgiveness, so many things, and I'm really, really eager to share it with our audience. So I'm really thankful that you're here today, willing to do that. So wherever you want to start, tell us about your childhood.
Yeah. First of all, Sarah, thank you for offering women an opportunity to share these type of stories. I think I'm always inspired when I hear stories of women and resilience. So I really appreciate you reaching out about this. I think my story just starts with growing up in Ohio, living a very normal childhood. I think what I thought was normal, and maybe what the rest of the world thinks is normal, is completely different. But, I grew up with two parents. One was Muslim and one was Catholic. And I remember going to church with my mom and then going to the mosque with my father. I honestly thought everybody had two sort of places of worship, who didn't have two places that they went. And so that was my childhood. I was exposed to different cultures. My father had originally come from Iraq, so he was actually trying to escape conscription. In Iraq at the time, if you were of certain age and male, you were expected to serve the Iraqi military. And the only exception was going to university. And so my father lived under Saddam Hussein. And so my father and two of his brothers actually came to the United States and Canada to escape that. And so my mom, who's American from Ohio, her and my dad met on a double date. And I was born, and my sister was born. And so they somehow made this work between Islam and Catholicism until it didn't work. And really what happened is culture. My father grew up with 13 siblings. His mother never worked. She was a stay-at-home mom. Women didn't have roles in Iraq besides to be caretakers. So I think for my father to come here and my mom to give birth to a child, especially a girl, and her not quit work and not quit her social network was very challenging for him. He did not understand it. Coupled with my sister being born, I think that was for him just too much. Now he has two girls. My mother is not quitting her job, still keeping her social networks, and that was just too much for him. And so that created second and third order challenges of him feeling accepted in the United States, him wanting to raise his family a certain way. And then also from my mom's perspective, she grew up in America. She knows nothing else besides that.
Right. So do you think that there was something that changed in your father in those early years, or kind of a tipping point in a way? I know you touched on it a little bit with your relationship, or your parents' relationship, and then maybe just the feeling of being acclimated to being an American citizen. But do you think there was something that changed, or something in him, like a switch that flipped?
I do. I think you hit on it. Something did change, and I think it was when he had two daughters. And I think it's one thing to be an American. It's one thing to live in our culture. I think that those are two different things. So I think what happened for him is culture. I don't think he felt accepted. I don't think he understood our culture. And I think what he decided to do was, in his mind, the best thing for his family or his daughters. And unfortunately, what my father chose to do was, kidnap me. And we can talk about that. But what he really wanted to do is take the family back to Iraq. He wanted us to grow up in a Muslim household, and he wanted us to be raised in that culture and in that religion. And so he made some really poor choices about how he went about that. And I want to ask, I mean, it's one of those questions I've never asked my parents because it's too much, but I want to go, did you two not talk about this
Right.
ahead of time? Like,
Right.
did this not come up about your different religions? Like,
Right.
by the way, the world has been fighting. These two religions have, at the beginning of time, have had challenges. How did you guys think you were going to overcome this? And I really think that they thought love would overcome it.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, it didn't.
Right. So tell us what happened to the extent that you're comfortable telling when your father did inevitably take you back to Iraq.
Yeah, so again, I'm 8 years old, so I want to set the picture so everyone realizes, think about Sarah when you were 8 years old, right? And so I'm 8 years old, and I find out that we're going to go on vacation. We're going to go to Iraq to see my grandmother, my dad's mother, because she was a bit sick. And the biggest thing that I was excited about is that I didn't have to go to school
Right.
for like a month.
Yeah.
It's because I'm 8 years old and I'm like, yes, I don't have to do homework. So there's something super exciting about that. And we went off. So me, my mom, my sister, who's about 4 years younger than me. So I'm 8, my sister's 4. My parents were actually separated by this time. They both really realized this wasn't going to work, but they were still they were really good at co-parenting. And so actually my mom went with us. So we all went to Iraq as a unit. And I'll never forget when I landed in Baghdad and felt the heat, the sun, and that it's like a blow dryer in your face.
Yes, we've got some listeners that know what you're talking about.
And like it just smelled so exotic and different. And as I'm sitting here right now, I can still smell it. It's so odd, right? How these memories, how smell can flood into your memory. But I just remember landing there, and then we drove from Baghdad up to Mosul. And I was just like, wow, this is fascinating. And we get there, and my dad's family was so unbelievably welcoming. And I didn't speak Arabic, but you can see on their faces, you can feel it. You can literally feel their energy. They're so excited to see you. And so it was this huge welcoming home. It was amazing. I could just feel the love. But there was one thing that was driving me nuts. And again, I would just want everyone to realize I'm 8 years old here, okay? So no judgment.
Right.
Everybody was fawning over my sister. And they kept going, oh, Helwa, Helwa. And she's super fair skin, has these big, giant green eyes, this gorgeous, blonde, brownish hair. And then I look like me, which is dark hair, dark eyes, olive skin tone. I look like them. So I'm not their exotic. So they're all fawning over my sister. And I just am like, why her? Like, what is going on? So it was so annoying, right? So that was like kind of as an 8-year-old perspective, right? Everyone's fawning over her. And we just have an amazing time there. We got to meet my family. My grandmother was sick, not on her deathbed sick, but she did have some knee issues, and she was hobbling around. And for context, the Middle East, I would say they're dramatic. You don't know if you're sick. You don't know if like you're on your deathbed or you have a cold. That's just the Middle East. There's drama. And so I don't think there was necessarily anything nefarious. I just think, hey, she was sick, and she was, but not necessarily like how Americans would maybe take a whole vacation, if you will, to see somebody. But she was so warm and so loving. And trip went great. Last night that we're there, so we're there about a month or so. And last night we're there. We're sleeping all together as a family. And my dad wakes me and my sister up. And he says, hey, do you want to go back to your aunt's house? So previously that night, We had been at my aunt's house celebrating, had a big party, food. And he says, do you want to go back to your aunt's house? There's going to be candy, cake. He says malta, which is ice cream. It's like the one word I can still remember. Priorities. And we're like, yes, of course we want to get up in the middle of the night and go get some candy. And usually your parents are trying to like force you to sleep.
Right.
No one's ever waking you up to have a good time as
right.
an 8-year-old.
Right.
So we're like, yeah, let's go. And we go, and it's awesome. There's candy. My cousins are there. It's just a great, great night. And as the night's going on, this is what I equate it to is, have you ever, when you were a young kid, perhaps gotten lost and then got scared of like, wait a minute, where are my parents? I actually need these folks, right?
Yeah.
That's how the night went. So we're having a good time. I'm playing. My sister starts to cry. And normally I'm like, get it together, right? Like I'm the big, quote unquote, big sister who's like mature, right? I'm like, stop crying. She's crying for her parents. But I'm also like, where are our parents? So I start asking, where's my mom? Where's my dad? And no one's giving me a good answer. They keep saying, ruh, which is, he's gone. And they keep saying, you need to go to sleep, go nam. And I'm like, no, I want my parents. Like, where are my parents? And so me and my sister, we're just crying. We're livid. We're trying to maintain like some dignity, right? And I think it was the first time that I like actually like comforted my sister. So I just want the record to show it was growth on my part, where I actually felt like protective of her. Like something shifted in me that day where it was like, okay, wait a minute, this isn't like my enemy, right?
Right.
This is, how do I protect her? And how do I protect myself, right? So we went to bed that night, crying ourselves to sleep, holding each other, and thank goodness, we had each other. We wake up the next morning and neither of my parents are there. And my family's trying to bring us food, trying to comfort us, and we want nothing to do with them. We're just like, no. We don't want to eat. We're scared. We just want our parents. And no one speaks English. No one speaks good English, I should say. And I know they're my family, and I feel safe, but I want my parents. I'm 8 years old, and my sister wants her mom and her dad. So about a month goes by. Neither of my parents come. So we're in a room in this house in Mosul. I can't say that my family wasn't trying to comfort us, but like we just didn't want to come out. We were too scared. So me and my sister kind of hole up, if you will, in this room. And finally, after about a month, my father comes. And it is so exciting to see your parent. Like it's joy. And someone who speaks English, so we can actually have like a conversation. And I remember my dad comes and we sit. It's interesting how memories will come back. I cannot remember what I had for lunch yesterday, but I can remember every detail about this moment. We're in this room, we're in Mosul, we're on the second floor, the bed is green, we're both sitting on my dad's lap, and my dad's talking to us. And I remember him holding hands with us, and I remember every detail. And my father says, I have some hard news to tell you. Tells me, he says, Alea, I'm going to need you to be the big sister. But he goes, your mom has left us. And my sister starts like crying. And I'm like, what? What? Why? What's going on? And he goes, she just doesn't want to be a mom anymore. And so let's take like what I call like a mini break, because what happens is, as a 7 and 8 year old trying to get ready for school, my mom would leave me a checklist of things I had to do every morning. And one of the things was brush my teeth. I don't know why I'm a gross kid, but I'd always try to like skip that step. So right before I was like leaving, my mom would go, did you brush your teeth? And I'd say, yeah, I brushed my teeth. And she'll let me smell your breath. She'd be like, you didn't brush your teeth. And we would fight over me brushing my teeth before I left for school. So it was this huge, big thing. So the reason I bring this up is because in that moment when I'm with my dad and he's telling me my mom doesn't want to be a mom anymore, I say, Dad, I know why. And he goes, like, Liesh, why? And I say, it's because I wouldn't brush my teeth. And I'm like, Dad, I'm going to brush my teeth. Mom does not have to worry about that anymore. I know she's mad about it. She's right. So I go into this whole thing about brushing my teeth. And my dad's like, no, that's not it. And I'm like, no, I know it's it. So as myself as a kid, I'm like, okay, you're going to have to brush your teeth. Like you've really hurt your mom. And he's like, no, that's not it. You can kind of see his confusion. He's like, no, that's not it. Like, it's just us now. And I'm like, so are we going back to America? Are we staying in Iraq? And he's like, yeah, we have to stay here. And I don't know how to explain it. I don't even know. Your whole world changes in just a matter of minutes. Of all the family you knew, your mother's doesn't want to be, like, it's uncomprehendable. It's still uncomprehendable as I'm sitting here talking to you.
And what I think is interesting, and I think anybody that's experienced childhood trauma can relate to this, is that in that moment, you blamed yourself, right? And that's such a common thing that is seen when children experience abuse or trauma or feeling rejection or abandonment is, what did I do? And that makes the healing journey that much more difficult. But I want to point that out, how common that is. So keep going and tell us what happened after that.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And it's taken a lot of therapy
Yeah.
for me to get to that same conclusion that you came to. Because when you're a child, you don't think about that at all. Mm-hmm. You're just trying to make the pain or the abandonment or whatever go away. Mm-hmm. And so that was it. I mean, I wish I could say there was something more. That was it. And but after my dad says this, I think I was thinking, well, this is our life now, right? Like, we're gonna have to live here. And so we were coming out of our room now. We were socializing a bit more. Still a lot of trepidation, still hesitation. We couldn't speak the language. A lot of point and yeah. This is what I want. But one morning, me and my sister wake up to every cuss word you can imagine. But I just want to point out it's English.
Okay. So
we shouldn't understand these words.
Yeah.
But we understand all the words. So
you knew something was up.
So we hear all these English words and we hear like screaming. So we were on the second floor and we run downstairs and it's my mom. It is my mom. She looked, I've never seen her look like that. She looked animalistic. Like she was just screaming at everybody like, how could you do this to me? What kind of people are like, but she was scary. Just, I mean, animalistic. I can't overemphasize that point. It just, I've never seen a human or her like that before. And the first thing I did is I ran up to her and I said, why'd you leave us? And her face is like, I didn't. Is that what they told you? And I'm like, yeah, but why'd you leave us? And so I'm on this sort of, why'd you leave us? It's making her more angry. So she's like screaming at everybody. But at this point, me and my sister are like glued to her. Like we are not leaving her side at this point. And so what happens is, she was back at my father's mother's house. So, her mother-in-law. And so she's asking if, and my mom has no rights. Right. My mom has, she has no visa, right? Or her visa is going to expire. She has an American passport. She's a woman in Iraq. She has nothing. So she has to, on the goodwill of people. So she's asking my uncle and my family can we all go together back to my grandmother's house? And they're all saying, we can't. Like, there's no way. And she's like, I'm not leaving this house. I am not, you will have to, you will have to pick me up. I'm not leaving. And so they do agree to take us all together back to my grandmother's house. So me, my sister, and my mom go. I still remember the ride there to, and I told you my father comes from a huge family of 13. So it's like a dramatic movie. Everybody's involved at this point, right? So everybody's at the house when we get back to my grandmother's. And my dad's there. Lots of fighting, Arabic, English, it's complete chaos. But my mom is going upstairs, and I'm like hanging on her pant leg, and she's carrying my sister, and we're going upstairs, and she's packing her bags, but she's not packing my bags. And so the first, and again, weird memories, but I had this one shirt. It was like a cat eating a watermelon. And I'm like, you need to pack my cat watermelon shirt like right now. And she's like, I'm not packing your stuff, right? I'm like, you need to pack it, like this is my favorite shirt, right? Again, this is 8-year-old me. And, she's not packed, but I'm like, forget it, whatever, as long as I'm with my mom. And so she's packing her stuff. We go downstairs, me and her, and whole family's down there. And she says to my dad, I cannot believe you're making me do this. And so she's holding my sister in her right arm, and I'm down by her left leg. And she looks down at me and says, Alea, I'm so sorry. I have no idea what she means. But I can tell you, I felt everything that she meant. And what happened is my dad gave her a choice. He said, you can only take one of them back to America. And so my mom had to make a choice who she was going to take back to America, me or my sister. And she chose my sister. I have no words for the feeling of abandonment. I'm using the word abandonment, but it's one of the most awful feelings. You just feel empty. And there's so much that goes into it, right? Your family split up. Your mom just chose your sister. You're left here in this country by yourself. And so I watched my mom, drive away. And I didn't see her again for a very, very long time. And so I want to pause here and just say that, I forgive my mom. She was put in no good choice, right? Like that's not a reasonable choice by any means. But as an 8-year-old, it doesn't, that doesn't make sense. As an adult, I can say that now, but as an 8-year-old. And when she left, the anger that I had, it was like anger. Like it felt like my whole body was on fire. Never felt anything like that again. And so I started to live my life as an Iraqi girl. And as luck would have it, the first Gulf War broke out while I'm there. So lived under Saddam Hussein. I don't have any Iraqi documentation. All I have is an American passport. So now I'm in jeopardy to be potentially prisoner of war if they find out. So I started going to school. I start learning Arabic, start wearing the hijab. Luckily, I look like I do, dark hair, dark eyes, olive skin. I can blend in. And started to live my life as an Iraqi girl.
And how many years were you in Iraq?
About 3.5 years, almost 4 years.
So that would be almost into your preteen years, just about
12.
Yeah,
12.
which are, anybody knows, some of the most formative, so you were basing your reality and identity around this new life and probably clinging to it because the life that you had before was unexpectedly ripped out underneath you. And you were probably, I'm sure, just clinging for something to belong to. So what do you think in those few years changed for you in terms of how you were seeing the world around you, being raised in such a fundamentally different world on really every level?
I think the most obvious thing to me, having grown up in the United States and then going over to Iraq, was just how women were treated.
Mm-hmm.
It was one of them. I mean, there were so many other things, but it was just obvious of having to cover up, having to be subservient. And I'm not saying in a bad way, but just subservient. For example, having discussions about when I would get married as soon as I started my menstrual cycle. Just like, what?
Mm-hmm.
And so those were really, they were surprising to me, but I was so young where I didn't have a minute to accept or reject. I just didn't know.
Right.
Education, like the school system. So, I went to, and when I went to school in Toledo, Ohio, it was, boys and girls. That's in Iraq. It was, an only female school.
Mm-hmm.
And you only went to a certain time in the day. And then as a female, you were expected to sort of quit at 8th grade so you could help out in the home. Only having, one of the most obvious things was living under Saddam Hussein and then hearing on the news how America was attacking us. And I remember thinking, and there was only 2 TV stations in Iraq. It's not like we had all these options, right? And they were all controlled by the government. And so I remember thinking, why is America attacking us? Don't they know I'm here? Like, why would they try to hurt me? And so I even started to think, like, why is America doing this? Like, why are they bombing us? Why are they? I didn't understand. And so I started to question that. I started, Islam, right? There's no other way, right? Like, if I thought I was Catholic for a second, that was no longer appropriate. So, the praying 5 times a day, I had to do that. And I don't want to say anything was like forced. It's just sort of immersed. Like,
yeah, it's part of it's the culture. It's your every day at home, at work, at school. So it became your life.
Survival.
Right.
I mean, there's a survival aspect
right.
of it.
Right.
And I remember, like, if I wanted to go to the store, I had to have a male figure with me. Like, I had to have one of my cousins with me. So if I wanted to go to, they would have I equate them to gas stations, but they're not gas stations at all. It's like these little huts.
Yeah.
And if you wanted to, go get something, the males could easily go, but I'd have to have a male with me. So there was always this, in America, I just didn't have that,
Right.
So that was one of the most obvious changes for me. It's just the difference between, girls and boys, because I was a young girl at the time.
In the years that you were in Iraq, what was your relationship with your father like? Did that change with time?
It's actually good, because he was all I had.
Right.
And, one thing it's hard for people to understand is, like, your parents are your parents.
Mm.
You don't, I didn't know that he made my mom choose. I didn't know,
Right.
It's like your lifeline.
Yeah.
This is all I have. And so I'd say a good relationship. I didn't hate him or anything. I felt like I was lucky to have somebody like him. And having, at one point, both of your parents taken away for that 1 month, and then having lost a parent, not necessarily like in the grave lost, but like you don't have one. You're just appreciative that you have one parent with you.
Mm-hmm. And then I think, even knowing what you know now, another relatable feeling of anybody that's been abused, neglected, or wronged by family members, you still love them, which is, again, another radically difficult emotion to handle. So As those years passed, what happened next?
So I just never thought I'd come back to America. That was like something that was very clear in my head. I remember one day, the Gulf War has started, and I lived in Mosul right next to a hospital, and it was called Mustashfa Saddam, which means Hospital of Saddam. I just have to say, like, every hospital, I think, was named after Saddam. This is the one in Mosul.
Right.
Like, everything was named after. That's how dictatorships work, right? Yeah. And so there was a hospital right there. And I see a helicopter land. So where I lived, right next to where we lived, there's the hospital and this huge open field. This helicopter lands. And I remember, like, all the neighborhood kids would come out. Like, it was a big deal. Like, Americans came. You know what's interesting is, as much as, like, we kind of talked about why is America bombing us, there was this love of American culture. And, like, there was still a love of America. It's very odd. It's sort of this dichotomy of, like, wait a minute. On one hand, we're saying this, but on the other hand, we, like, love the culture.
Right.
So we see this helicopter land. And I remember seeing that American flag on their flight suits. And so I remember, going to my cousin and saying, we got to go outside. And by that time, all the neighborhood kids were going outside, and we were just running up to the helicopter, and they were transporting some sort of patient. So we saw that the patient go out, no idea what kind of patient. And I think that they were handing out candy to everybody. And so I go up to this guy, he's in a flight suit, and he's got a big helmet on. And I said, hi, my name's Alea. I'm from Toledo, Ohio. My mom's looking for me. Can you take me home? And like the guy just like stopped, and I couldn't see his eyes because he had his, helmet on, and he like steps back, and I'm like, no, my mom's looking for me. Like, you got to take me home. And he just like shakes his head, and I'm like, my mom is looking like you. I'm from Toledo, Ohio.
That's not what he expected to hear when he landed in Mosul. Let's just have a laugh from that.
So
he was not expecting to hear Toledo, Ohio when he landed in Iraq. Keep going.
So we're going to do a public service announcement too. So one, if you land in a foreign country and someone is very specific about the state and where they're from, you're just going to take them home and figure it out in the back end. Yeah. We're all going to make a pact right now. Like, we're not going to mess around.
Yeah.
And the second thing is, and I just want to say this, I love my Army brothers and sisters, but there's a reason I joined the Air Force. It was an Army Black Hawk.
Oh, man.
So you guys messed up.
Well, we beat you guys in football a couple weeks ago, but that's a conversation for another interview.
So I will say, if I ever talk to the Army, I love talking to you guys and just making you feel so guilty. You had one shot, as Eminem would say, and you really messed up. But as you said, can you imagine landing in a country and some kid who looks like me, who I don't look, quote unquote, Caucasian, like, and says, hey, I'm from Toledo, Ohio, take me home. That poor gentleman, whoever you are, I forgive you. I'm not mad at you. But yeah, so that I missed my opportunity to go home. And I love the Army, by the way. I just want to make sure you guys really know that.
Oh yeah, we know.
So I don't get home that way. And what's happening is my mom is really working hard back home. So there's this whole other story, right? My mom is back home in Toledo, Ohio, working to figure out how to get me back. And because we've started a war, Gulf War, like, she can't just go in and get me, right? It's not like she thought about hiring mercenaries. She's trying to get somebody to take this case. And finally, the FBI hears her out and says, yes, we can help because the laws have recently changed, and it's a kidnapping case, but we don't have jurisdiction in Iraq. That's a overseas type of jurisdiction. And right now, like, it's not a big priority, but we're going to try to help you. So the FBI can do no wrong in my eyes. I just want to say that FBI, thank you for helping my mom out. So she starts working with the FBI. The FBI starts coaching her and helping her and saying like, okay, you have to get him on our turf. We can't go over there, but if we get him on our turf here in the United States, we can make this work. And so to her credit, they're coaching her. She's listening to them. Back in the day, there was this company called MCI, and it was like $1 a minute to call.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And that's what my mom would do. She would call back to Iraq, try to talk to me, try to talk to my dad, and try to talk about how she could unite her family. And she, for probably 3 years, that's what she did. She worked what she could. She tried to hire mercenaries, didn't work out. And finally, she got some results.
And what were those results?
So she was able to convince my father to come back to the United States because he had some assets here. And she said, she didn't want the FBI to freeze them. And she wanted to help them. And also told him, I want to reunite our family again. Mm. I would like to sell everything here and come back to Iraq and live with you. And I can't imagine how hard that was for her.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah.
To do that. And so she said, can you bring Alea back and we can be united as a family? And just really focused it on the family aspect. And so my father agreed to come back. He said he was going to bring me back as well. So by the time the FBI is involved now, they can see that my father has booked a ticket for one only, mm-hmm. But he's going into Canada.
Okay.
And this is where relationships matter,
yeah,
right? So the United States has one of the strongest relationships with our Canadian friends. And so they work something out, let's just say that, mm-hmm. so that when he does land in Canada, they're going to help us get him back. So my father lands in Canada. My mom picks him up, drives him back through the U.S. border. FBI has a helicopter over them.
Oh my gosh.
Watching. Canadian police are involved. Everybody's watching this. As soon as they cross over, there's a specific point where she has to stop. It's at a gas station. Once she goes into the gas station, they'll make the arrest. So my mom has to drive an hour with my dad in the car and pretend like nothing's wrong. And so she does. She gets to the gas station. She gets out. They make the arrest. And my father was arrested and goes in front of a judge. And they basically say, you will not get out of prison unless your daughter comes back. So ironically, the FBI still doesn't have jurisdiction.
Right.
And so under the cover of night, I get woken up by my uncle. And he says, we're going to drive all the way to Jordan, Amman, Jordan. If we go through any checkpoints, I want you to fall asleep. And if anybody asks you, you're my daughter. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
And that's what we did. And I have no idea that my dad's arrested. Like, I have no idea any of this is happening. And so we did. We made it through all the checkpoints. We're in the full-fledged war. Made it to Amman, Jordan. And it was the first time I saw my mom in almost 4 years.
Your mom was in Jordan?
Yep. She was waiting for me in Amman, Jordan. And my mom was there.
So I'm assuming your uncle was contacted and agreed to help get you back.
That is correct. So my father made some calls from prison.
Okay.
Gave the order essentially, and that's how I got out through Amman, Jordan.
And so tell us what it felt like to see your mom again.
The best day.
Yeah.
The best day. You know what I remember the most is her smell.
Yeah.
And I just remember I could smell her. And there's something I think about, mothers.
Oh, yeah.
We're cooking in the bellies, right? And there is something about that, but I could just remember I could smell her before I saw her, and not in a bad way, right? Like,
no, it's so comforting.
It's the best feeling. I remember touching her face.
Yeah.
Because I I was starting to forget what she looked like. And I remember saying, Mom, you've changed. And what it was is she had aged. But if you don't see somebody for a long time, you know, you don't you're like, there's something different about you, Mom. And I didn't have the words to articulate that.
Yeah.
And but then at the same time, you know, it was the best day, but then my dad wasn't there either. Right. So that's when you just kind of realize your life is never going to be whole with two parents anymore.
So when did you start to wrap your head around what had happened and actually figure out the truth behind all of this?
Probably not to my 20s.
Oh, wow.
Could I really, really wrap my head around culture? My mom being given a choice. Why she picked my sister. So, you know, that's the question. Why did she pick my sister? And it's actually such an easy answer is she picked my sister because she was younger. She was 4 years old. So my mom had this fear that she wouldn't remember her, which is very valid because I was 8 and I was starting to lose that. But the other thing is because she was vulnerable, because she had green eyes, blonde hair, and fair skin. My mom knew she would never blend in. And I had a better chance of blending in. And she said that's sound, you know, it's sound decision making. And I would never want my sister to have gone through what I went through. So, you know, my mom made the right choice with the crap choices that she had. But I get it. So it took me a while to figure that out, that forgiveness piece of like, I think people can be selfish and we think, why'd you pick, you know, why did you pick her and not me? And then as you get to be an adult, you realize, well, it's not fair. She was put in that choice to begin with. Therapy, doing the work to figure out abandonment, blaming yourself. There's some other things that happen there. We kind of talked about, you know, women are not necessarily prioritized, so they're subject to sexual abuse and having to digest all of that, probably like 20s, 30s.
Yeah. So you returned to the United States at what age?
12 years old.
12.
Yeah.
So there's probably so many words and thoughts and feelings to describe what the next few years were like and what coming home was like, back to a home that you maybe never thought you would see again. But explain to us what that experience was like and, you know, how you basically built your identity again with this new reality.
Yeah, it was tough. Sarah, it was tough because I was 12, right? So I'm a little bit older, and then I have to, like you said, reestablish myself in one way or the other. But I was so broken in different ways. So, you know, when I left, I was one person. When I came back, I'm a completely different person. I'll give you an example. This is sort of funny, but it's not. So like, I remember when I left, this is 8-year-old me, like Mickey Mouse was the cool, right? Like I was like, I'm so obsessed with Mickey Mouse because I'm 8 years old. So when I came back at 12, I'm thinking like Mickey Mouse is cool.
Yeah.
So like the things that I thought were cool, like were not cool anymore, especially as a kid.
Yeah. You're almost like trying to pick back up where you left off, right? Because you didn't experience those years in between in America.
I was behind. So I remember I'd be like, I want to wear these Mickey clothes and they don't fit anymore. And I'd be like, I want the Mickey clothes. And my mom would be like, you know, Alea, that's not in style anymore. And she's trying to help me because I'm going to have to go to school. And I'd be like, I want that. So there was this sort of childlike mind when I came back that I wasn't caught up. I was not fun to be around. So I'll give you an example. Growing up in a, you know, Muslim household, culture, Islam, all that, you know, women were covered up head to toe. You would very rarely see somebody, you know, not covered up. And I was taught, like, if you were to show your legs or arms, you know, it's considered haram, which is, you know, shameful for a woman. So if I would go out with my mom and I saw, like, say, just a woman in shorts, I'd go up to her and say, "You're going to hell." Mm-hmm. So, like, yeah, my mom's not taking me anywhere, right? Like, and I can only imagine what she's like, "Oh my gosh, I fought 4 years to get her back," and she's telling people at the grocery store to go to hell.
Yeah.
But I say all that, like, that was in my head. I was like, "Yeah, that's not acceptable, Mom." And my mom was like, "What?" Mom's like, "What are you talking about?" So then me and my mom struggled because my mom's like, "I fought to get you back and you're so different." I wouldn't go outside. I remember we had like in the neighborhood, we had a pool. And I remember saying, "I'm not going to the pool. All those kids are sinners wearing bathing suits like that." And my mom was like, "No, they're not." And I think there was one day my mom like put a bathing suit on me and like locked the door so I had to stay outside. And I'm like, "I'm not going into that pool. You're going into that pool." And so she didn't know how to how do you handle that? Mm-hmm. So it took me a long time to adjust, to not think people were sinners and not to tell people that, right? Mm-hmm. I was afraid of men, right? So if there wasn't another like male was family, I wouldn't be around them. I remember we had a 5th grade male teacher and I was like, I can't have a male teacher. It took me so long to adjust. And then when I came back, my mom was dating somebody. And that was just too much. But as an adult, you're like, of course she's, it's not fair for her. But those were some of the hardest years that I had because I was not assimilating well to the American culture.
Right. Well, I think give yourself some grace because you're going through something that I don't think many people can say that they've gone through with the change and the trauma and the reacclimating twice at such pivotal years in your life. But what's so fascinating in all of this is that despite those challenges and despite the shock and, building a new relationship with your family, yourself, and creating this new life in America, you ended up serving in the American military. It's fascinating because I think it makes me wonder and want to ask what did all of these events in your life do in terms of how you viewed being an American citizen? Like what caused you to want to serve? Tell us about that.
I am a forever grateful American. And I'm going to get emotional about it because this country has given me everything I have. And I was a 12-year-old girl in Iraq, and the FBI tried to help. They didn't have to help. I was a nobody. They helped. They helped my mom. They helped me. And, the least I can do, the minimum I can do is serve this country. I think about all the time, we would not be speaking if I was in Iraq. You've seen what's happened to Iraq I could be an ISIS bride. I've lost family members to militia, to ISIS. I'd probably be married off, not by my own choice. I wouldn't be able to serve. And so when I think about that, I think about how lucky I am to live under this flag. And the minimum I can do is serve this country. And that's never going to be enough. Just the little service that I have done this, never enough. And what got me to join initially was, one day, and this is part of it too. I think there's such a misunderstanding of what happened. So one day somebody called me a terrorist in high school. And I forgive them. I'm not mad at them. I don't blame them. But after 9/11 happened, people could not tell the difference between an Arab, a Muslim, or a Middle Eastern person. Everyone was just hobbed together as a terrorist. And I have the name Alea Nadeem. And somebody said, "Hey, aren't Aren't you a terrorist? What's your terrorist serial number? And I remember going back home to my mom and saying, hey, somebody called me a terrorist today. And my mom is so angry at my father. She goes, that's from your dad's side, not us.
Oh, gosh.
Which is the wrong answer, by the way.
Yeah.
And, but she explained to me, like what it was. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, Iraqi people are good. Like, I had these wonderful experiences with my family. They were amazing people. They were good people. They're not a reflection of Saddam Hussein, right? Like, there was a fear when I grew up there of Saddam Hussein. Like, everybody knew he was not a great guy. Like, it was just, you had to keep it quiet. So everyone was just saying, and I mean, people heard like, let's make Iraq a parking lot. And people would just say these things. And so my initial sort of call to serve was like, I'm going to go help. I'm going to go join the military, and I'm going to teach them and help, like, not realizing I have to go to like tech school, basic training.
Yeah.
I think I'm just going to like, bingo, snap my fingers and be in Iraq. That's just not the case. And so that was sort of my initial drive, is to educate people and help. And I felt I knew the culture. I knew the language at the time. I was ready to go. And so that's what led me into that journey. And then once I got that little taste of service, it's been the best thing I have ever experienced. And maybe a lot of problems other places. And I know maybe we don't have it right, but I can tell you what freedom doesn't feel like. And there's not been a day here in the United States where I've not felt freedom. I can tell you in Iraq, I did not feel freedom. And how do you explain that to somebody? How do you explain that feeling of freedom?
I don't think you can. If that's the reality that you're born with and it's all you know, it's hard to imagine a life that isn't like that. And I like your point about still loving people back in Iraq, because those not connected to war, I think, have a hard time really wrapping their heads around that there are real people in these countries, good people, great people, and they're often born into some really unfortunate circumstances. And it's so sad to think that there are people that have and will continue to probably just group them into this one label of bad or evil. And I think that your perspective of, having had the experience that you did, which was painful, and having your freedom stripped away from you, but then also having this love for those people that you left behind, and probably family that, you never got to see again, that loss too. I want to move kind of into a positive note and ask you what you've loved about your service and what's been some of the most meaningful assignments or moments for you serving.
Yeah, so the one thing that I've loved about service is just meeting so many different people from so many different backgrounds. I mean, it's just it's like the whole United States comes together from and even we also get immigrants. Like, immigrants can serve our country. Having us all come together for one mission is the most powerful thing in the world. It's like, we may never cross paths in life, but because we've been in the service or we've joined the Air Force, we get to cross paths. I mean, look at us right now.
Right.
We're sitting here today because of service.
Right.
And so that has been the best thing about service. And then the second thing about service is you get to give back. The American people are worth serving. When people say, thank you for your service, I heard this amazing quote by this awesome fighter pilot named Fifi. And she said, I always reply back, you're worth it. And, it's so true. Yeah. I don't care what they're worth it. And it will never be enough. And so just to serve people makes me grateful. Makes me grateful that I have the opportunity to serve. And then the last piece is one of the things that I love about the military that I've really appreciated is you make these bonds and friends that no other person would understand, but I can call up any of my military friends and say, hey, I need to sleep on your couch tonight. No questions asked.
Can't tell you why, but I'm going to be there in 5 hours. So, yeah.
No questions asked.
Yeah.
You don't see each other in like 10 years, but you show up at their wedding. Or it's just something so special that no one else will understand. And I love that.
Yeah. I agree on all fronts. I always laugh thinking about the people I come across and the different just melting pot of places people are from, beliefs, personality types, religions, like all these things that come together, and you just have to wonder, does it get any more diverse than this? I mean, just the people that, in one unit you can meet, or one assignment, you can just be exposed to so many different people and have your eyes open to so many different personalities, and then the bonds that you make are just so deep, and honestly, I think as close to family as it can get without actually being family, So I want to talk a little bit about your career and some assignments you've had. The list is long, but what's been the most impactful for you?
I think one of the most, there really is so many, to be honest with you. I think there's two that come to mind, and it was when I was enlisted. I started out enlisted security forces, and one of the places that I was stationed was Albuquerque, New Mexico, and at the 150th, and just humbles you. Security forces will humble you. I remember, carrying all these heavy weapons, picking weeds. I think I was like an E3.
Yeah.
And you just got humbled in a way that set me up for the rest of my career. I've since commissioned, but I hearken back to those days a lot. Mm-hmm. So I really remember what it was like. So not too long ago, I went back to I was at my unit and they were picking weeds. And I remember, well, things have not changed, but it really does build character. And so those years for me were the best thing. So everything, it's always gone up from there.
Yeah. I also think it's so important in those early years, some of those silly moments that you talk about, like picking, literally picking weeds, or having to, clean a barracks room or do God knows what. And, it's important though, because I don't feel like I'm above anything.
Bingo.
I don't feel like I am too entitled to do anything. And I think that's there's a formula here, right? We break you down and humble you so that you don't have an ego that gets in the way of being called to do some pretty crazy things. But keep going. So keep going with some of those other assignments.
No, Sarah, it sounds like you have your own experience. I could see you're like, oh, the dorm rooms, the day room.
Yeah, I may have a few nasty experiences that I could tell you about, but we'll save that for another day.
Yeah, and I learned early on being enlisted, especially from my my training instructor. He, I remember he said, I would never ask you to do something I'm not willing to do. And that has stuck with me over the years. So I think being enlisted was not only foundational, formative, but it was one of the best experiences I had. And then the close second is when I was deployed. So I was deployed to the Combined Air Operations Center. And I remember, there were some things going on. And, I got to really explain Iraqi culture, Middle Eastern culture. So, for an example, we were, ISR, and we're looking at some things, and all of a sudden they saw all these folks come up to the roof, right? Sleep on the roof. Everyone's like, what's going on? There's going to be something happening. And I said, nope, they're just sleeping on the roof because it's hot. Yeah. And it was like one of those movies, like, in those movies where everyone turns back and they're like, who are you? And I'm like, point of order. Let me explain. So I was like, hey, they're just sleeping. It's hot. In Iraq, it's really hot. And you actually sleep on the roof to cool down. I know that doesn't make sense to you, but I was like, I've slept on, that's what we used to do. Mm-hmm. And there was some definitely suspicion of me of like, okay, but nothing did happen.
Yeah.
And then I built some trust with people, and then I got to really overlay not only the operations that we were doing, but the cultural aspects. Mm-hmm. As say like, okay, this is what you guys think is happening. And this is from our narrative, the United States. But here, let me tell you culturally what's happening, right? And it was one of the places I felt the most useful and I could contribute the most. And having lived in Iraq, like it paid off, if that makes sense.
Well, talk about a full circle moment too of your life coming together in a pretty crazy way, like being in that moment and being able to tap into your knowledge and, you know, the crazy story of how you got that knowledge, but you were exactly where you needed to be in that moment and doing what you wanted to do, which was educate people about this culture and about what was going on and use your experiences for the better. So you're able to do that.
Yeah, that was exactly it. I just felt I was contributing at my max. And I'm also really, really great. I have to give a shout out to my leadership at the time because sometimes leadership isn't accepting of that. Mm-hmm. My leadership was beyond phenomenal to accept that into sort of the operations center and how that all fit in. And so I actually listened. And so it's also a lesson for me. There may be something I don't know or a culture, but it's like I need to listen. And so I'm also grateful for them.
So all of this being said, your beautiful, unique story, what has this all taught you about forgiveness, forgiving people, understanding why they may have done something that they did in that moment, and having the high degree of empathy that I think that you have?
Boy, have I learned a lot about forgiveness. So I think I've learned this. You have two parents. That will never change. I will only have two parents. I can stay angry, or I can forgive. And so I think part of my forgiveness was acceptance. So before I got to forgiveness, I had to accept that these were both of my parents, that they never talked about religion before they got married. I had to accept that my father thought he was making the best decision.
Yeah.
And that's hard to accept that. It's hard to think my father had these great intentions, but how detrimental they were. I think my father's definitely atoned for what he's done. But I think he, in his heart, he really thought it was the best thing. And so accepting my mom for saying like, hey, why did you pick my sister, right? So once I accepted, it just unlocked forgiveness, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not even a thought anymore to me about forgiveness. And it's made me who I am. And so I can't be mad at that.
Does it change the way that you view people that you disagree with and how you approach people just day to day, having that degree of empathy?
I do. I think situations make people. And I think sometimes not everybody fits in the square, right? And how do you go about that? Because some people have this talent or may have done something wrong, but how do you see past that? I'm not saying it's easy, mm-hmm. but sometimes I need to give them some grace.
Yeah.
I don't want to. But I just realize like we all deserve that. Mm-hmm. We all deserve a little bit of grace. We all deserve forgiveness. And if nothing else, I will accept you. I may not forgive you, but I will definitely accept you for who you are, the good or the bad.
Yeah. And I think your point on people believe they're making the best decision in the moment with what is real and factual to them, and how particularly relevant this week, because we're recording during election week and nobody wants to listen to one another right now or accept that as much as you may vehemently disagree with somebody and be appalled by what they believe in, no matter what side you're on, because, you know, it's all about perspective. It's really important to truly understand that people think that they're making the best decision with what is real to them and what is going on in their world and what is important to them and what they've been taught. And I don't think a lot of people know how to do that. I mean, I'm not great about it. It's hard, especially, you know, in the situation that you were in when what someone believed in hurt you and traumatized you and uplifted your life. So I think it's a really powerful lesson. It's so hard in practice, and it takes time. But the strongest women I know, counting you in, and men, strongest people I know, and leaders and people that can really change the world know how to do that. They don't spend their days angry or hateful. They know how to forgive and empathize. So I think it's a really powerful quality that you have, and something that has already allowed you to do some pretty amazing things and will continue to. All of your experience, being an American citizen, growing up in Iraq, being a veteran, how has it changed who you view Alea as, who you are, your identity? Do you feel sometimes like your identity is, or who you are is almost coming from a bunch of different places at once,
I do. I do. I think the one thing that I feel the most, and I'm not entirely sure why, but I feel so American. But I think the reason why is because America is just a hybrid, or a culmination of all these different people who come together. It's like the one place I can be my true authentic self. And there's so much acceptance with that. And I know that's like, people may go, what? And I'm like, I have always felt accepted.
Yeah.
Like, this is a place for me. Do I think like, yes, am I, an Arab woman? Yes, absolutely. Like, I had that. But do I feel like an Iraqi woman? No. Right? Like, I don't think that experience, like, I don't know if I would have a place there as a woman. But in America, I just feel like I can be me. And so I think for me, I've just really realized that there's so many other diverse people. And my story is not unique in the sense of, yes, maybe it's unique in my, like how it all happened, but we all have these stories. We all have these moments that happen. And I'm just one of many people who have a story. We all have a story. And I think just, it's kind of nice to know that, and somebody like, but I wasn't as bad as yours. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm like, I swear it's not a measuring, because it's still important to that person. But we all have hardships, and how we deal with them, I think, matters. And I really do believe, like, you really articulated it well, is like, how do you move forward? I mean, I look at Nelson Mandela. Look at some of these people who had these horrible things happen to them, and they forgave and moved on. So it can be done. It can be done.
Well, I want to end a little bit on you as a person. How do you like to spend your days? What's a fun day in the life look like for you?
One of my best days is being out at the farm with my horse. So even though I'm in DC, I have a horse, and his name is Ray. And it's just free therapy. It's quiet. You get to bond with an animal. You can't force the animal to move. I mean, it's like a 2,000-pound animal. So you have to learn other ways to communicate. You have to bond. You have to develop a relationship. That's very difficult. And so that's probably one of the most favorite things that I love to do. Second thing is history of buildings.
Ooh.
I'm a big, I love giving Capitol Hill tours. I love learning the history, which you'll find out most of our buildings in DC were built by immigrants. Knowing who built them, why they designed it the way they did. The famous Eisenhower building next to the White House is one of my favorite buildings to tour and give a tour, I should say. But the history of the United States is fascinating to me. So.
I love that. Well, our closing question that we ask all of our guests, and it's always tough, is our mission centers around uplifting incredible women like yourself and telling their stories. But we know that those stories are born out of the women that came before them or that lived alongside them. So you are one of our women in the arena, but we know that you have women in the arena too, women that you admire and look up to. So if you had to name one or a few of women who have influenced you, be it a peer, friend, family, celebrity crush, mentor? Who would it be?
Sarah, as you know, it's like so hard because I stand on the shoulders of giants. There's so many women. So I'd say there's two. All the women who came before me since World War II and beyond, I just want to say thank you, because had you not done your job and opened the door, I wouldn't be here right now. Mm-hmm. And so thank you. Especially those ladies who joined in the 80s. It was extra tough. So an extra shout out to them.
Yep.
And then there's one person who's really made me who I am, and they did it by showing me. And it's a woman by the name of Judy Ortiz Aragon. And when I was in New Mexico, I was part of the security forces, and I met her there. She was a recruiter for ROTC at the University of New Mexico. And I'll never forget, she goes, "Mijita," which is daughter in Spanish. "Have you thought about commissioning?" And I said, "No, that's not for me. I don't think." She goes, "Oh, yes, you could commission." And she helped me get a scholarship, an ROTC scholarship, helped me get a dorm room, helped me get an allowance for food, and taught me what it is not only to be a woman, but to be a kind woman and truly to turn the other cheek. I mean, she was the most sweetest person. If somebody was maybe unkind to her, she taught me how you flip that around. And those skills have paid off. And so without her teaching me that, I call it the polish. She put this polish on me and helped me at a time where I was just broke. Mm-hmm. There's no way I would be here. So I credit most of my service and who I am as a person to her. So Judy, I love you. And thank you for making me the woman.
We love you, Judy. Well, thank you for that. And Alea, thank you for sharing your story. I know that digging back deep into some of these memories is undoubtedly painful and hard, but it's so powerful to hear about where you're from, what you've overcome, and how that had, that difficult experience and the challenges that came afterwards translated into such a beautiful story and transformed you into somebody who was convicted to serve, proud of being an American, and was going to take what had happened to them and turn it into something beautiful. And I know that your story will uplift and inspire those that listen to it. We're so thankful to know you, so thankful for what you continue to do as a service member, as a historian, as just a really amazing woman and a kick-ass American citizen, if you ask me. We're so thankful for you. As a token of appreciation for coming on the show, we have a little bracelet for you. These are our Women in the Arena bracelets. There's a quote on there from the famous speech that our show is named after, and we hope that you can wear it in maybe moments of uncertainty or just when you're out with your horse and spending your days doing what you love, just knowing that you are a woman in the arena. You embody so much of what it means to be a strong, resilient, kind, incredible person, and that you have a team of people here that are always cheering you on and supporting you. So thank you so much.
Sarah, thank you. I love this quote. Teddy Roosevelt's my favorite president as well. But I also want to thank you. Thank you for what you're doing to highlight women. And not only that, but I know you do this for all the right reasons. And it's sometimes very hard to find people who do it for the right reasons. So thank you for having a heart of gold, and you're a great American.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
The Women in the Arena podcast is powered by Iron Butterfly Media, a production company committed to honoring the lives of women who have had an unseen and outsized impact on our world. We hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you have a woman who you would like to nominate as a guest, please shoot us a message on our social media platforms. Be sure to subscribe and follow on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. See you next time.